In this video, I'm going to show you how to conduct summary statistics and describe quantitative and categorical data. So again, to repeat from one of our earlier videos, before we do any statistical analysis to data, we want to make sure that we understand what the data looks like. This includes measures of center, measures of spread, and just in general, the distribution of the data. What does it look like? So this video will kind of help you do that. Now, SAS Studio has a lot of different tasks that you can use to explore your data. I'm just going to show you a few of them today, but a lot of the tasks I'm going to show you have many more options than what we'll go over in these videos. But please feel free, and in fact, I encourage you to try to use different options in the tasks I'm going to show you today, because these tasks are very powerful and they can provide you with a lot of information about the data set that you're looking at. So I'm here in SAS Studio, and we are going to use everyone's favorite data set, sashelp.cars, and we're going to look at some of the statistical summaries of different variables in that data set. So here in my tasks area, the first one I want to call your attention to is under the data category, and that is the Characterize data task. So I'm going to go into the Characterize data task. I'm going to maximize my workspace so I have lots of room. Now I already have the sashelp.cars data set selected here, but of course if you don't, you just click on the Select a Table button and choose the data set that you want to analyze. So here under Automatic Characterization, I'm going to pick the columns that I want SAS to give me some basic summary data about. Now you can put both categorical and quantitative columns in here, and it gives you the appropriate summaries based on the type of variable that you're putting in here. That's why they call it automatic characterization. So I'm going to click the plus sign, and let's just pick a couple of variables here. So why don't we pick one categorical variable? Let's pick the car make, and then maybe we will pick let's say, horsepower, and maybe the weight of the car. And to select multiple variables, all I'm doing is holding down the Control key on my keyboard. Now I have a Windows PC, but if you were using a Mac, you could do the same thing by holding down the Command key on your keyboard. So that's how you can select multiple columns. So I'm going to click OK. And right away, I could just run this as is. It will deliver some basic summary statistics to me for those three variables. So why don't we just run it as is and then maybe pick some additional options for this task. So I'll run this program, and then you'll notice, here we go. I have a frequency table for my categorical variable of make. That's the only one that I looked at for categorical variables. So you can see, for example, that Chevrolet is in this data set 27 times, which is about 6.31% of the data set, okay? So that's what, pretty useful information. If I asked, what percentage of the data set is Porsche, you could come down here and say, oh, Porsche is about 1.64%. They only appear in the data set 7 times. There are only 7 Porsches in this data set. There are only 12 Volvos, and that's about 2.8%. So, very helpful. I could kind of scroll through and say, well, what is the most frequently occurring make in the data set? And from just eyeballing this, it looks like it might be Toyota at 6.54%. I don't see other ones that are higher than that. So, great basic data about a categorical variable. You can also see the distribution of make in a bar chart here. So again, you can see here, Toyota seems to be the highest. Looks like Chevrolet is pretty far up there as well, and Mercedes-Benz has quite a few as well. So a simple bar chart. All right, if I take a look at the quantitative or numeric variables that I'm looking at, I did one for horsepower and for weight. So here in the descriptive statistics for numeric variables table, I can see basic measures of center and spread here in this table. So I can see, for example, there are 428 cars in this data set, or at least 428 of them have values for horsepower. The minimum horsepower is 73. The average or the mean is about 216 if we're rounding up a little bit. about 210 as the median. The max is 500 horsepower, and the average or the standard deviation is about 72. So, really, again, some basic statistics that you would want about most quantitative or numeric variables. Here in the weight, the average car weighs about 3,500 pounds or so. And here's the distribution of the horsepower variable. Here's the distribution of the weight variable. So if I had to describe these distributions, I could say, oh, well, horsepower is reasonably normally distributed with a slight tail to the right. But I mean, this is a very slight skew to the right. Ditto here for the weight, pretty normally distributed with a very slight skew to the right. So, this Characterize data task gives you the basics. You can also go into the options screen, or the options tab rather, for this task, and you can select different options. For example, if you don't want histograms, you can turn those off. If you don't want frequency charts, you can turn those off. But this is a great first task when you're just looking at your data and you want some very basic summary statistics for some variables. So characterize data, great place to start. All right, let's take a look at a few others. Most of the other ones that I'm going to show you are going to be under the statistics category. And I would recommend, if you're going to use statistics to take a look at your data, I would strongly recommend using both the summary statistics and the distribution analysis task. So we'll go into both of those today. So summary statistics is going to be pretty similar to what characterized data does, but with a little bit more of a robust option set. So you're going to have a little bit more control over what the output looks like, and you're going to have a few more options in the summary statistics. So let's go in there. Again, I'll maximize my workspace. So I'm, again, using sashelp.cars, and I can pick the analysis variables that I want here in summary statistics. Now, because summary statistics is geared toward numeric variables or quantitative variables, you notice I'm not seeing any of my categorical variables here. It's just producing summary statistics, things like mean, median, mode, standard deviation, etc. You can't take those measurements for non-quantitative or categorical variables. So we are only seeing quantitative variables here. So again, let's pick a couple of variables. Once again, I'll pick horsepower and weight once again, and I'll click OK. Again, right now the task is ready to run. I don't have to specify any additional options, but let's go ahead and take a look at what some of those options might be. First of all, at the bottom of the screen here on the Data tab, I can group analyses. I can classify them by certain variables. So if you're wanting to produce summary statistics by group, so for example, show me the mean, median, and mode for horsepower, but I want you to group it by SUVs and by trucks and by sedans, etc. So show me the mean, median, and mode for each category of car or each body type of car. So you could do that. So very, very easy to do that using the group analysis by option. If we go into options, you see here how I told you have more control over what your output is going to be. So for example, if I didn't want the median, as it is actually by default unchecked, I can just uncheck it. If I don't need the maximum and the minimum values, I can turn those off. But if I do maybe want to see if there are any cars in this data set that have a missing value for any of the variables that I've selected. So you have some basic options here under basic statistics. You can also ask for additional statistics. As you see here, I can pick the variance. I can pick the mode, which wasn't in the characterized data task. I can pick the range. I can also get the skewness and kurtosis values, which are really important, again, for describing the quantitative variables. So I have a lot of different options. I can even output the percentiles for these variables. So a lot more control and a lot more robust statistics that you're going to get with the summary statistics task than you would with the characterized data task. Okay. I can also change the plots. I can say I want a histogram and a box plot for all of my quantitative variables, and I want you to put some inset statistics in those box plots. So you have a lot of options, as you see, and I, again, encourage you to explore the different options that you would have in the summary statistics box. So let's go ahead and run this program with the options I specified. So here at the top of the screen, this looks pretty familiar, although again, more robust than you saw in the Characterize data task. I have the mean, the standard deviation, the n, how many are missing. Remember, I added that, and in our case, there are none missing. The variance, the mode, the range, anything that I checked off here on the left-hand side, you're seeing appear in my summary statistics. You're then seeing a a histogram for both of these variables. So if we look at horsepower, here's that histogram we saw in the last task when we used Characterize data, but you also have statistics inset in the histogram as well. You also have a box plot on the bottom showing, your SIQR as well as outliers in this data set, designated by the outliers outside the gates or the fences of the box plot. And we have ditto for the weight down here at the bottom. So again, you have much more control over robust statistics in the summary statistics section. So again, explore that more, try different options, try grouping your summary statistics by a categorical variable. Again, explore as much as you can. All right, let's take a look at another descriptive statistics task, and that would be your distribution analysis. So one of the things you'll notice when you use different tasks in SAS Studio is a lot of them have features and options in common. So for example, you said, well, why does both Characterize data and summary statistics offer histograms? Well, it's because they're different platforms in the software, and while they may have some things in common, they each have unique characteristics and things that only one particular task can do. So that's what you're going to see here too in distribution analysis. So again, I'll go to distribution analysis. I'm going to maximize my workspace. For my analysis variable, I know I'm going to really shock you, but I'm going to pick horsepower and weight. I'm going to click OK. Here I have options. Now, this particular task is meant specifically for looking really closely at the distribution of those variables, things like skewness, things for kurtosis, looking at the normal density curve, looking at all of those things. So a lot more zoomed in on analyzing the distribution of that particular variable. So again, back on the data tab, I picked my horsepower and weight as my variables. I can add a normal curve if I want to here to the output if I would like to. I can add, for example, a normal quantile plot, and you'll see what that is. That's your QQ plot that you'll go over in class. So all kinds of options here, but they're really focused on the distribution and the normality of the data set. So if I run this particular task, you will see that here's the distribution of horsepower, okay? Here's what my normal curve would look like, and it is following a normal curve pretty well. Same thing with weight. And then down here, here's my QQ plots. So if you look at this, for example, because you see a large departure away from exactly normal, right? If this distribution was exactly normal, it would follow this diagonal line in the QQ plot. But because you'll see on the right-hand side, it is much less normal, and also on the left-hand side, it is a little bit not normal as well. Ditto for weight, but weight is a little bit more normally distributed than horsepower is. And you can again see that in the data set just by looking at it, right? We have a tiny bit of skew on the right-hand side of horsepower, but it is more pronounced than the skew is in weight, and therefore that's reflected in your QQ plots. So again, every task gives you a more laser focus on a particular quality of the data. So sometimes, if you're asked, for example, to get basic summary statistics like mean, median, etc., you can do that on a lot of different tasks. So just pick the one that you like the most or that you're most comfortable with. For example, I use summary statistics a lot when I'm looking at quantitative data, but that doesn't help me very much when I'm looking at categorical data. So, you just have to get to know the different tasks in SAS Studio and use the one that is going to help you with what you're trying to find out about your particular data set. I'll bring you into one more here before we finish, and that is the one-way frequencies task. Now, one-way frequencies are much more designed for categorical data, whereas summary statistics was much more designed or is limited to quantitative or numeric data. One-way frequencies is limited to categorical data. So again, I'll maximize my workspace. I will select an analysis variable. Now, SAS will let you choose quantitative data values here, but the tables you're going to get outputted are not incredibly helpful. So you really want to stick to categorical data values here in general. So let's say I wanted to take a look at what the distribution, or how many of each car make exists in this data set, and look at the distribution or the frequency distribution of that particular variable. So why don't we look at both, let's look at car make, which is up here at the top, and let's take a look at also the drivetrain. And drivetrain is like front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, all wheel drive, etc. So let's take a look at the distributions of those two variables, or frequency distributions of those two variables in the data set. So I'll click OK. And again, as you've expected, we have different options and we can get different statistics. You're going to use this task for other statistical tests in the future. So you'll be doing a lot more here on this options tab, but we're going to leave this alone for now. So I'm just going to run this particular task as is. Now, this should look really familiar to you. This is the frequency distribution table for car make. And if you remember, if I go back to our Characterize data task, it's the exact same output here that I had in Characterize data. So again, if I scroll down, here's the distribution of make. Here's the cumulative distribution to make from least common to most common. And here is the exact same thing for drivetrain, all-wheel drive, front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive. So if I asked you what is the most common drivetrain in this data set, you can easily say it was front-wheel drive at about 52.8% of the data set. And so the output, again, very, very similar. Distribution of drivetrain, and then the cumulative distribution of drivetrain. So, it's really, again, very, very similar output to your Characterized data. But again, it's only focusing on categorical data. And then there are going to be certain things that you can only do in the one-way frequencies task that you couldn't do in Characterized data. For example, later on, you'll be doing hypothesis tests and confidence intervals for proportional data. And you can only do that here in the one-way frequency task. You can't do those types of tests in Characterized data. So it's not that using one task over another is necessarily wrong for describing both categorical and quantitative data, but really they each have their own special qualities. I would start, as you're starting to get used to the platform, start with Characterized data as a task and see if that gives you what you need. And then if you say, no, I can't get the output that I need, or the measurement or summary statistic that I need, well, then go ahead and either use the summary statistics task if it's quantitative, or the one-way frequencies task if it's categorical. And so really explore the different options that you have. Don't be afraid. Nothing you click is going to blow up the classroom. It just may not give you the output that you need. So that's all for this particular video about summarizing data and doing statistical data exploration. And we'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.